Very warm good morning to everybody. It's mild outside, but it's warm inside, and not just physical warmth, but the warmth of fellow believers fellowshipping together. May God bless us as we study His Word together this morning. I was rather jealous when I heard of the gentleman who had the luxury of being able to go to sleep in an airport. The last time I flew, which was about a month ago, I had 15 minutes to run 17 gates through the middle of Helsinki airport, changing flights on the way out. And the great joy of it all was that I had to do the same on the way back as well. And I vowed never again to get connecting flights which are quite so close to each other. This is the beginning of our week of prayer, and I trust that you have the week of prayer readings. I have my copies, so if anybody is missing one and would like one, you're welcome to take this one now. Anybody here hasn't got one? Okay, fair enough. Our attention in today's week of prayer reading is drawn to an area of Bible prophecy whose importance and relevance at this time I do not believe can be overstated. It deals with a subject which is deserving of our most earnest attention, for it describes the last scene in the great controversy between Christ and Satan, just prior to and leading up to the close of probation for all humanity. It is an issue that will reach a global climax of a nature and intensity never before experienced in the theatre of human history, and which will place the Seventh-day Adventist Church, us, right at the centre of the world's focus. It describes also God's last appeal and warning to this world, and how this church, our church, is going to be involved. My wife always queries why it is that I read magazines from the back to the front rather than from the beginning to the end. And so, in keeping with my habits, I'm going to start with the end. That is the final issue of Earth's history, and work back to where we are today. I have some thoughts of my own which I would like to share, but we will be dipping into our reading from time to time to see what our GC President, Pastor Ted Wilson, is also wishing for us to hear this morning. I'd like to draw our attention then to Revelation chapter 13, and I'm not the only one that starts at the end and works to the beginning, because God also has done this in this particular prophecy. He has started with the last issue, and then later on, as we will see, moves to what he is doing about it today. But if you have your Bibles, please turn to Revelation 13. If not, I'll be quoting the verses anyhow. And it is a story of two animals which are brought to view. In prophecy, animals, or beasts as they are referred to, indicate kingdoms and powers in this world. And as we read these verses, we will discover something of the nature of these powers, but the emphasis will be more on the issue involved than in their identification. So starting at verse 1, the prophet John in vision says that he stood on the sand of the sea and saw a beast rising up out of the sea. In prophecy, the sea represents peoples and nations. So here is a power which comes onto the world scene from a civilized part of the world. The second verse is a key verse, for it tells us that the dragon gave him, this is this beast, this power, the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. And in Revelation chapter 12, verse 9, the Bible tells us that the dragon here represented is none other than Satan himself. It's interesting to note that the dragon gives this power his throne, or as some Bibles put it more accurately, this power's seat. The original word refers to a stately seat, by implication of power or an earthly authority. Then in verse 3, it talks about the world and its relationship to this power. And it says that all the world marveled and followed the beast. So they worshipped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast. Here again, I believe, is a very interesting thing for us to note. That as people were worshipping this power, in actual fact, what they were really doing was worshipping the force of evil that was behind it and had placed it in this world. None other than Satan himself. Going down to verse 7, it says, "An authority was given to this power over every tribe and tongue and nation." So this power was a worldwide power that wielded great authority over mankind. In verse 8 it says, "All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of the life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world." So here in summary we have an earthly power arising in the civilized world of the day, but established by none other than the devil himself. It is given an earthly seat and great authority. But there's a recurring theme, a central issue, which is here. And I wonder if anybody here this morning has spotted what that issue is. Would anybody like to hazard a guess? Let me just read 2 verses very quickly again. "So they worshipped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast." And then again on verse 8, "All who dwell on the earth will worship him." So worship here is the central issue that is involved. Verse 11, we now, through the eyes of John in vision, see a second earthly power that rises onto the world scene. John says, "I saw another beast coming up out of the earth." Now, if the seas represent great peoples, masses of peoples and nations, then the earth represents a part of the world which is not populated, or which is sparsely populated. And it has a very distinctive nature, this animal. For we are told that it has 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. Who in the Bible do we associate a lamb with? Jesus Christ. And the dragon, as we have seen, is identified by Revelation as being the devil himself. So here is an earthly power which arises, comes onto the earth's scene in a very sparsely populated part of the globe. It begins with a characteristic which is Christ-like, but in actual fact it will end up speaking like the devil. This power is very similar to the first power. In verse 12 says he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell on it to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. Down into verse 15, he would cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. So here is this second earthly power. It arises, as we've seen, in a sparsely populated part of the world. It comes onto the scene with Christ-like characteristics and intentions, but will end up speaking like the dragon. It commands widespread authority. It is a worldwide power. It exercises all the authority of the first power in that first power's presence. And once again, it is very interesting to go back and look up the meaning in the original language of what it means in the presence of. The word which is here used as presence is an earnest or continued inspection. So in other words, as this second power is exercising its authority, the first power is looking with earnest and continued inspection of what it is doing, which suggests that it is under the first beast's controlling and approving gaze. It is identical in nature to the first beast. It will cause the whole earth to worship the first power and will impose severe penalties, even the extreme penalty for not doing so. Let us turn in our readings now then to page 4, where we find a comment that Pastor Wilson has made here. If you look at the second column, the very last sentence, where it says the beast represents. And this is a short paragraph that Pastor Wilson states. The beast represents the apostate church. The second animal in this chapter, which represents the United States, creates an image of this first beast. A definition of this image is given on page 443 of the Great Controversy. And this is what Ellen White says in Great Controversy. Talking about that apostate church, she said that it resulted in a power that controlled the power of the state and employed it to further her own ends. In order for the United States to form an image of the beast, the religious power must so control the civil government that the authority of this state will also be employed by the church to accomplish her own ends. Now, I think if I wasn't exactly quoting from Scripture here, and from the spirit of prophecy, you might be wondering at this point of time what planet it is that I live on. For this describes, at the end of time, a state of affairs which seem quite incredible. Here will be the final issue in this world, the issue of who we worship. And the time, we are told in prophecy, will come when the church will so control the state that it will seek through the state to dictate who we worship. And that one that we will be being caused to worship will be none other than an apostate church which has been established by the devil himself. We should not be surprised, I don't think, that worship is going to be the final issue, because this has been Satan's goal all along. If we were to turn to Isaiah chapter 14 and verses 13 to 14, we would find Satan's 5 I wills, and I will quote them now. For you have said in your heart, speaking of Satan, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit upon the mount of the congregation. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. This is the thing which brought Satan down and which he is still seeking to achieve today. When Jesus was on this earth and was taken into the desert to be tempted, we are told, again the devil took him onto an exceedingly high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in their glory. And he said to him, all these things I will give to you if you will fall down and worship me. And Jesus said to him, away with you, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. What Satan seeks to achieve through might, through deception, and through coercion, God seeks to counteract through appeals and warnings to humanity. And so now our attention is drawn in our reading to the three angels' messages which are found in Revelation chapter 14, and of which we have heard something already about in our children's story. Let me read the first angel's message from Revelation 14:67. And it is a threefold message, as we will see. John says, then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the seas, and the springs of water. Let us turn to our reading again, shall we? Once again on page 4. And in the manner which I have told you I operate, we're going backwards instead of forwards. And we'll see the second paragraph entitled The First Message. Ted Wilson says to us, the first angel's message proclaims the everlasting gospel. This is the first part of the threefold message. It proclaims the everlasting gospel, salvation through Christ's righteousness and grace, his justifying and sanctifying power. Then comes the second part of the message. The angel announces that the time of judgment has come. And if only we had time this morning, we would look through the prophecies of Daniel and realize this is talking about the prophecy of the 2,300 days, which takes us to 1844, where Jesus left the holy place of the heavenly sanctuary and moved into the most holy place for the final part of his ministration in that sanctuary. The angel announces that the time of judgment has come, and then the third part of this message, and calls people back to the true worship of God and to recognize him as creator. The call to worship God as creator automatically places upon people the responsibility to observe the day that honors his creative act. Created beings cannot honor their creator while defying the command to keep holy the Sabbath, the seventh day of the week, which God himself set aside as a memorial for his creation. During the time of trouble, immediately preceding Jesus' return, the seventh day Sabbath, that is worship, will be the central issue of conflict. Ellen White writes, the Sabbath will be the great test of loyalty, for it is the point of truth especially controverted. When the final test, so the Sabbath will be the final test, when the final test shall be brought to bear upon men, then the true line of distinction will be drawn between those who serve God and those who serve him not. It's Great Controversy, page 605. And then interestingly, another thing that he says, and I've been aware, especially last year, we had a number of sermons talking about creation and evolution. And I know there are a number of this congregation who are particularly interested in this subject. And this is why it is so important. To worship God as the Creator means there must be a willingness to reject false theories about the origin of life, including evolution. It is impossible to believe in theistic or general evolution while saying that God is creator of heaven and earth and all the life they contain. Here is Pastor Wilson's recommendation to all of us, his appeal to all of us. Stand firm, for God's creation of this world by his word in 6 literal days of recent origin, capping that week with the same wonderful Sabbath we enjoy every 7 days. The reason I believe that evolution is being pushed and is so popular is because it is part of the devil's plan to turn our eyes away from the Creator and the worship which he deserves, and to attract that worship for himself. It is very difficult when you find yourself in a minority proclaiming creation when the whole world is talking about billions of years. Sadly, I remember going to preach in one church and being invited home for dinner afterwards, where I got the distinct impression that the good folks there were a little bit embarrassed about the creation story. And over dinner they tried to explain to me many, many ways in which God could have been the creator and yet still evolution have played a part. Ted Wilson says to us, stand firm, for God's creation of this world by his word in 6 literal consecutive days of recent origin. We come now quickly on to the second angel's message, Revelation 14:8. And another angel followed, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Let us read again from our week of prayer reading, this time still page 4, the second column, where it's headed second message. The second angel's message announcing the fall of Babylon was first presented in the summer of 1844. Because this announcement follows chronologically in the prophecy with the preaching of the judgment, and because the churches to which this message applies were once pure, Babylon here refers to churches that rejected the warning of the judgment. If we're to go back into our church's history and to look at the Advent Millerite movement, when this message that judgment of the earth was actually the first Adventist believers after the Millerite message, when they first understood this prophecy to refer to Christ's ministration in the heavenly sanctuary, Seventh-day Adventists, as they soon were to become, were to find themselves rather isolated as the established churches ridiculed the truths that they were presenting. The second message, Babylon is fallen, is repeated in Revelation chapter 18, 1-4. God's people who are still in Babylon are called out so that they will not be guilty of participating in her sins and will not receive the plagues that are to be poured out on her. If I may take the liberty, I would like to go into a little aside this morning, and I feel somewhat okay in doing this as a result of the question that you asked in the sub-school lesson, Mervyn. Has the church signed any agreement where we will agree not to proselytize in other churches? I don't know whether there has been a shift in emphasis, but I recall very shortly before retiring from denominational employment, attending a ministerial council in Swanwick nearby. And Melvin, you might well have been there on that day. I remember when one of the great and good was brought from the United States to address the ministers of the North England Conference. And the great emphasis was on reaching out to the unchurched. And I have absolutely no problem whatsoever in reaching out to the unchurched. But the illustration that was used was of someone who had lost a watch, and we were told, well, you wouldn't go looking for it under a lamppost where there is light. You would go looking for it in the darkness where you had lost it and couldn't see it. And the analogy that was being drawn was that we shouldn't bother about trying to win people from established churches today. We need to go instead to the unchurched. Now I repeat, I have absolutely no problem whatsoever in us reaching out to the unchurched of this world. But this message of the second angel tells us that also we need to appeal to those of God's children who are in established churches today. Ellen White said in Great Controversy, page 383, in what religious bodies is the greater part of the followers of Christ now to be found? Without doubt, in the various churches professing the Protestant faith. That is quite some statement for those of us who believe we have the truth and we are the remnant church for last days. That the vast majority of God's children up to the end of time will not be found in the Seventh-day Adventist church, but will be found in other churches other than the Protestant churches. The day will come when the cry will need to go out, when worship becomes the final issue, if not before, where we need to proclaim the second angel's message and call these people out and into the communion of those who worship the living God. Now finally we come on to the third angel's message. Verses 9 to 11. Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and his image and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. The smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. Well, they're quite heavy words, aren't they? And I'm certainly not this morning going to get into the discussion of eternal suffering. I don't believe that's what is signified here. But let us see what Pastor Ted Wilson has to say to us this morning about that. Looking at the bottom of page 4, where it says third message, he says the third angel's message contains a clear warning. Don't worship the beast in his image or receive its mark. To do so will result in annihilation. Once again, quite heavy words. The content of the third message is based on the prophecy of the preceding chapter, Revelation 13. That's where we began. Because the central issue will be worship. Are we loyal to God as our Creator and worship Him? Or do we follow another system of worship that does not honour the Sabbath of the Creator? The mark of the beast, observance of a day other than the seventh-day Sabbath, is an institution that clearly sets forth the authority of the beast. One world church boldly boasts that it has changed the seventh-day Sabbath instituted at creation from Saturday to Sunday. Other churches indicate that they worship on Sunday as a memorial of Christ's resurrection. Neither assertion is found in Scripture, and as a result, the recognition due to the Creator is removed. Now, I think that you will agree with me that these are rather heavy topics to be thinking and talking about. And yet to go back to my opening statement, that we have here prophecies that have been given to us that talk of a time that is going to come in this world, and I believe it is not that far away, when we are going to see dramatic events of a nature and of an intensity which we could not at this point in time perhaps even begin to imagine. I believe that as a church family, we need to study the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation in particular. And I believe this for one or two reasons. The first reason is given to us by God himself in Revelation 1, 1 and 3, where John, writing under inspiration, says, "The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants," his followers, "things that must shortly take place." And then this verse, "Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of this prophecy." So these prophecies might be dealing with heavy topics, but blessed are those who read them and hear them and keep the things written in it, for the time is near. Secondly, I believe that as the church proclaims these three angels' messages and finds itself as the only one doing so, it is going to meet with a great deal of hostility. I ask myself the question, could I ever contemplate standing in those dramatic final days for a message which I didn't understand and as a consequence could not be fully confident in? I think I would buckle at the knees within the first 30 seconds. We need as a church to understand what God has revealed to us as coming in the future, because to be forewarned is to be forearmed. And then as Ted Wilson is encouraging us, he says, except we internalize these truths, that is, we take them on board and make them our own, except we internalize these truths, how could we ever be able to successfully proclaim them? There's a book written by Clifford Goldstein called 1844 Made Simple, where he makes this very short statement. Until we see the truth of 1844, this is the first angel's message, realizing that Adventists are the only ones that teach it, we will never fully understand our calling, our purpose, and our mission. One final reading from Pastor Ted Wilson's article here on page 5. It is in the middle column, the second heading there, Are We Willing? And this is his appeal and his question to us all this morning. As believers of prophecy, of Christ's righteousness, and of his soon coming, are we willing to renew our commitment to Christ by following his example of warning the world and sharing his love? Are we willing to share the distinctive prophetic three angels' messages? Are we willing to be used by God in these last days of Earth's history to lovingly and powerfully share his final message of redemption, love, and judgment? Then let us first receive and believe these messages for ourselves, allowing them to revive, reform, and transform us so that the light of truth will shine through us to a world in darkness. My closing comment is this, that this is not just an issue over a simple day of the week. This is our Creator and Redeemer seeking to save from the usurper's grasp the creatures of his hand, that they may enjoy for all eternity the joy and perfection that he intended when he first made this world. This work is nearing completion, perhaps far closer than we could ever imagine. We need to hear and accept heaven's final message to humanity, and through us, so does the world at large. For whoever calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. How shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe him of whom they've not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher? And how shall they preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the gospel of peace, who bring glad tidings of good things. The truth of the message today is that we have been sent. May God just give us beautiful feet.
Amen.
Amen.